introductions first.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just start and then in your department. My name, again, Lisa Kelly Vance. I'm in the psychology department, specifically my area of school psychology, and this is my 20th year here at UNO, so I'm really proud of that.
Just started.
And I am Brian McKevitt. I'm also in the psychology department in the school psychology program, which is why Lisa said we work closely together. I'm in my 9th year here at UNO.
I'm Amanda Dago. I work in the Aluno program.
This is for you.
And this is my year and a half.
I'm Andrea Vaneke and I'm the director of the Aluno program. I was here a couple years before and then just came back.
Okay.
I'm Becky Radasta, and I'm in the English department. It's my 10th year at UNO, so that's 4 years of undergrad, 2 years of grad school, and now I'm in my 5th year. Maybe that doesn't make 10 years. I'm in the English department. And this year, I changed hats, so I'm not in the math department. I've taken on the associate director of the Writing Center in addition to my teaching.
I'm Ben Smith, I'm in the economics department, and I'm brand new.
My name is Vivi Wu, and I'm in the Department of Art and Art History. Yeah, I'm a new faculty year.
I'm Beth Chalaki. I'm in the Political Science Department. I teach International Relations and Sustainability, and I'm also new.
I'm Ashley Beer. I'm in Geography Geology department and I'm also
I'm Karen Hine. I'm with the Academic Partnership for Instruction. I've been with UNO for 14 years, past 3 with the API.
I'm Ryan Wong. I'm in the biology department, and this is my first month. So.
And I'm Brett Leonard. I'm in music, and I'm new as well.
Welcome, everybody. And there are some handouts that went around. I don't know if the folks that came in got a chance to get those. We have two purposes of our time together. One is to talk about the course evaluation instrument that we use here at UNO. So just a little bit about its contents, a very little bit about the research to support its use. And then the second area of our presentation is the TABS process. TABS is an acronym for Teaching Analysis by Students, and it's a way that uses the course evaluation instrument to provide some feedback, constructive feedback on an individual's teaching through a consultation process. So that's our two purposes for our presentation. So we copied the course evaluation instrument for you and have that there. And for those of you who are new to UNO, I'm guessing you probably haven't gotten a chance to look at it or think too much about it. It's actually a tool that has been around for quite a while. It's an instrument that's official name is the Students Evaluation of Educational Quality, or the SEEQ. And the author is Herbert Marsh, who has been researching this instrument since the 70s. So it has quite a long history as a course evaluation instrument. It has some good research behind it in terms of the factors or the dimensions that it measures. And in fact, those are listed there on the course evaluation instrument. There are 9: learning, enthusiasm, organization, group interaction, individual rapport, breadth, assessment and evaluation, assignments, and course workload / difficulty. So it's pretty intuitive on the instrument itself that the first 4 items are the learning items, then enthusiasm, organization, clarity, etc. So they're listed in the order of the dimensions on the form. What Lisa and I thought we would do is just take a few minutes right at the beginning to go through what the dimensions measure. Obviously you can read the items yourself, but the information that comes with the tool provides a little bit more specificity about what the dimensions are intended to measure. So there are basically 3 categories of how those 9 dimensions are split up. There's the ones in red are skill-related dimensions. So dimensions related to learning, organization, breadth, and assessment and evaluation, so teaching aspects of teaching that have to do with actual skill in pedagogy. Okay? The dimensions that are listed in black are rapport, enthusiasm, group interaction, and rapport. Those have to do with relationships that you develop with your students and the nature of those relationships. And then the last dimension, the last category are course-related dimensions, assignments, and then course workload / difficulty. So kind of the business of actually running the course and what you have students do. So I apologize that I didn't really think about the color aspect of the slide and how that didn't work on the black and white handout, but it's on the screen. So the folks who developed the SEEQ have descriptions, pretty nice descriptions of what each dimension measures. And so learning is one of the skill-related dimensions, and I hate to just sit here and read it, but it's probably the easiest way to talk about what it measures. Scoring well in this dimension generally reflects the opinions of students who are challenged and stimulated, who consider their learning through the course to have been worthwhile, whose interest in the subject was increased, who are conscious of having understood the subject matter, and who generally rate the course highly, are clearly expressing feelings of accomplishment on challenging learning tasks. I think maybe one thing to point out just by this definition of what the dimension says is that it's all about student opinions, right? And so that's with any evaluation of this nature, it's all about student perception. So if they feel like they learned something, if they feel like they got something out of the course, then ratings on the learning dimension will be higher. What's to say about that? I know what I was going to say. The other thing is, so when you look at your score or the rating summary in the learning dimension, then you can take it back to this definition and look at students' interest, if they feel like they understood the subject matter, if they feel like they were challenged, and then lower scores in that dimension would reflect their belief that that might be something that would need to be improved on in teaching. Rapport one.
All right, this is a rapport one, and I want to make a mention here about the rapport categories because depending on your background, you may have gone through a program or have experience that highly emphasized this category, or maybe it was one that was just like, no, you just got to get the content across. But what I like about this tool is that the rapport becomes an important part of our teaching because it's relationship to the learning. And so they're using the rapport dimensions here to show that our interactions with the students and their interactions benefit their learning, and so that's where this comes out. So it's not just, do they like me? Do they really like me? Am I popular? But this is actually the research base to why rapport is a critical variable in our teaching here at UNO. And so one of the categories, or the dimensions, is enthusiasm. And that's, says here, faculty score well here if they're noted for enthusiasm, being dynamic, energetic, and then this humor. This is one when I'm meeting with some of my consultants that's, they say, do I have to tell jokes in the classroom, or what does that really mean? And so kind of be cautious on that one. You don't have to just stand up and tell a joke each time. It's not what this is talking about, but just an appropriate use of humor. Students whose interests in and enthusiasm for the subject are aroused are likely to have enhanced achievement in learning the subject, as I mentioned before. So this is relevant to the fact that this enthusiasm that we show as instructors then helps motivate the learners.
And does anyone teach an online course by chance? Karen?
I have.
Knows a lot about it.
Yes.
Karen shrinks.
Yes, I have.
I needed some consultation on this one about how to be enthusiastic on an online course, because my ratings, my last online course I taught, were actually pretty low for this, and I reflected about that I sort of blamed it on the tool, that maybe this isn't really a good good category for an online course where you don't have personal interaction with a student. It's very difficult to develop rapport when all they do is read what you write. And so just something to keep in mind if you do teach an online course, that enthusiasm, the score might be a little bit skewed because you don't have the personal interaction with the students, unless you do some sort of technology that lets you have, I don't know what they're called, people on the screen who represent you. I have no idea how to do. Anyway, the next one is organization, and like Lisa mentioned, and I'm glad she did, all these tie back to research about good instruction, right? So good instructors tend to have organizational strategies that then help the students be able to follow along, keep the pace, know what to expect is huge in good teaching. So this one is about skill in communicating structure and clarity. It is about well-organized instruction, clear instruction delivery, ways of teaching students that allow students to understand exactly what you mean, so clarity in lesson delivery, objectives stated ahead of time so students know what to expect from your lessons.
Group interaction then being another aspect of the rapport, getting activities or discussions, or even questions in the class that the students are able to interact. So that's what this factor refers to, those verbal interactions for questions and answers. And then that they get to share ideas and knowledge. So higher ratings suggest that the motivational potential of social interaction with others in learning context is being capitalized upon, and also that the classroom context can be used as a venue for these activities and practicing, testing ideas, getting feedback. So allowing the student voice there and how we are with that. Oh yeah, I'm next again. So believe it or not, individual rapport is in the rapport category. And so this is a lot about how we are connecting as faculty with the students and how they are feeling about that. So this provides for individual differences, taking into account their knowledge, their attitudes, and then just the contacts that we might have within the class, after class, office hours. So they, if you score well in this, you tend to be perceived as accessible and interested in the students and what they're doing.
Breadth is the sixth dimension, and this one is about really students' opinions about how much you, I think it's related to learning, how much you stimulate them, how much you challenge them in the sense of presenting theories and contrasting ideas, presenting backgrounds or origins of ideas and concepts. So rather than just saying, here's what you need to know, explaining where it comes from, what the background is, and the philosophies are that led up to the topic that you're talking about. Presenting points of view other than your own also goes with breadth. So I think I missed up there. Different points of view, discussion of current developments, potential to increase student knowledge and understanding through facilitating generalization beyond the confines of the specific situation. So I think it's about getting them to think more deeply about what you are teaching. Dimension 7 is one of the nuts and bolts of the course, just assessment and evaluation. So the techniques that you use to assess students' knowledge, to assess what you've taught them, and looking at the quantity of your assignments, the methods of examination and grading, and their opinions about that. Dimension 8 also related to assessment and evaluation, but focused specifically on the readings and the text that you use, homework, activities, laboratories, if that's applicable, and other non-examination related kinds of assignments. And then finally, course workload / difficulty is students' perceptions of how hard they had to work in your class relative to other classes that they have taken. So if they feel like it was way too hard or way beyond what's expected of a 3-credit class or however many credits at that certain level, then the research would suggest that they felt they wouldn't feel as successful in that class. So any questions or or comments about those 9 dimensions that are measured?
I might suggest that you could keep this PowerPoint handy, so when you're developing your reappointment papers and you find one category is really high on your teacher eval, you could use these summary statements and feed that into your results on teaching.
And I guess just to reiterate Lisa's point earlier that things like getting to know your students and having rapport or using humor in the classroom or being enthusiastic are very clearly styles of teaching that may or may not be reflective of how you were taught or how you learned how to teach, but they all do have a pretty solid research base behind them. So, whether or not you're a person who wants to get to know your students, the research would suggest that you should. Whether or not you're a person
Fake it till you make it.
Right. If you are not a person who smiles when they come in and greet your students, the research says you should, just to make them feel welcome and be a part of that classroom. And it's definitely a personality piece, right? It's someone's personality aspect to teaching to do some of these things, but they're important to do, at least according to research on effective teaching. Just very quickly, the ratings are multidimensional, and so the previous course evaluation form we had here at UNO had 8 questions. And they were really broad questions. They weren't necessarily very helpful in identifying what you did well, what you could improve on. And so this one is multidimensional. There's 9 dimensions that we just talked about that gives you a very comprehensive picture of your teaching for that particular class. Like I said, there's been 30+ years of research on this tool, so the ratings are relatively valid when compared to other assessments of teaching. Okay, so lots of studies been done to look at the validity of student ratings of teaching. And so if you compare student ratings to some other objective measure of teaching, like someone coming in and observing your classroom, they actually tend to be pretty well correlated. Okay? So ratings are valid when compared to other methods. They're also reliable, pretty consistent over time. So when students rate a professor in a class and then maybe repeat that rating later in the semester, like you would do for a TAPS consultation, it tends to be pretty reliable unless something profound changes during the course of the semester.
Like you met with a TAPS consultant and it blew everything out of the water. I mean, you just made so many improvements that,
Right.
yes.
And then the last one is often a concern among people who maybe think that they have a student who's out to get them. But what research has suggested is that the ratings are relatively unaffected by potential biases. And I tend to look pretty closely at the evaluation and look for outliers. And so when you get it back, you'll see what percentage of students rated a 5, what percentage rated a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1. And if there's consistently one student who's all 1s down the board, you know that that's a person that you couldn't do anything to make happy, right? And so I would just think that there's probably one of those in every crowd, and just not think too much about that. Look for patterns of those kinds of data, though. So if there's a lot of students who are having similar comments on one type of item, that might be something to pay attention to, not necessarily just the one outlier. Let's see. By the way, if you are at all interested in the research behind this tool, UNO on the, it's not the Center for Faculty Excellence website, it's on Office of Academic and Student Affairs, somewhere on there to navigate through. There's a PowerPoint that describes this research. There's a whole reading list of about 15 to 20 articles about this tool that talk about its research, its development. And so this is just a very brief summary to say that the folks who picked this tool for UNO did a lot of homework. It's a well-researched instrument, and it's a good one to provide feedback about teaching.
And I will say, having been a part of the prior tool, this is a huge improvement than what we used to use, and so you get a lot more good, helpful information.
Absolutely. The last thing I'll say about the tool itself, and then we'll talk about tabs and how we use the tool in tabs, is the automated course evaluation is upon us. And so I added this just mostly because I wanted to learn a little bit about what the automated course evaluation and how it worked is. The automated course evaluation was piloted this summer, and my understanding is that there are some colleges that are using it this fall, maybe one of yours. Arts and Sciences, ours is not using it until the spring. But it's the same questions that are delivered to students via a link. So all students who are enrolled in your course will get an email sometime towards the end of the semester requesting that they click on a link to complete the course evaluation form online. There's a window of time in which the evaluation remains open. If students have not completed it, they will get reminder emails to prompt them to please complete it. And I think the window closes after about 2 weeks, or if everyone completed it already, then it will close. After the final grades are submitted, then faculty gain access to the cumulative course evaluation results through Blackboard, which is pretty spiffy. I think, instead of waiting, in our department, our secretary has to process them all and then sends us the feedback, and it's sort of a long, cumbersome process for our staff, and so this will make it much more efficient. I think some concerns have been raised about student response rates on completing these. I know for colleagues that have taught online courses in the past, the response rates for these evaluations has been pretty poor. Now that it's becoming more systemic and university-wide, perhaps that will increase the response rate in and of itself. However, you may allocate class time to have students bring their laptops or their other electronic devices, just like you would allocate class time to have them fill it out, and just have them do it right there in the classroom on their devices, and that could impact participation rates in the questionnaire.
Brian, what wording would you use to tell a student when they say, well, now you're going to know what I said, or how would you respond to help them understand how it's going to be anonymous still?
Yeah, I used it last summer, and actually, surprisingly, I didn't have the concern.
Nobody asked?
Nobody asked, but I did make sure then, even though I said, do you have any questions afterwards, I said, I want you to know that I never see the individual results, that these are tabulated. I don't get them until everybody has responded. So I just said that verbally. So
I actually think it's better in terms of anonymity than this is, because on this, and I don't think students know this, I tell them, I get this back with what you write on it. There's no magical person at the university who's typing up everything you say. And so I don't think they know that. So I think electronically it's going to be much more anonymous, where what they write is typed on there, and we can just assure them it's not at all tied to their Blackboard account or their user ID. It's all anonymous, as much as we can assure them of that. Yeah.
Did you have time for a question? I'm sorry.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Being that you're the one, or did you both use it?
Did you use it last summer?
I used it in my online course last fall. Yeah.
So I come from a university that has something like this, and I was just curious on a couple things. One is, when the evaluations are actually being filled out, are you able to download a list of the people, not what they said, but if they filled it out?
I don't think we can. I think the people at whatever office sends out the link to students, they can track who's completing them. But
That's my understanding too, but I don't know that for sure.
yeah, I don't think we have access to
Yeah.
that.
Okay. It was very traditional to start to do bonus points for the people who did evaluations.
Ooh.
So it was that's kind of an important thing to get the response rate up. But yeah, so
Interesting.
yeah. But anyhow, the other one is, can you add your own questions?
That came up. No, is that?
I don't think
I
you
don't
can
think
at
you
this
can. But I think, if I remember, somebody was working on that aspect of it, but I could be making that up. But
There's a section on here that says supplemental questions to be added by instructor.
Right, but
On
that's
the
the
hard
one
copy.
in class. So if
Oh,
you're,
I see.
yes, so you would be asking that. So, I didn't add anything last summer. We can follow up on that, can we?
Yeah, we sure can.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
Remind me of your name and we'll get back to you. Or should we just send it back
Let's
to,
send it to everybody.
answer to everybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a really great question.
Yeah.
Why the emphasis on anonymity? I don't understand why the students don't put their names in their evals. If these are their opinions and they're willing to express this to the administration, why would they not express it to the instructor? Especially if their grades are already in. Why the
Often
fear of?
these are completed often before the grades are done.
Right, but we wouldn't receive them until after the grades are in. So there's no way that I could say that
Right.
Ryan, he gave, he said something bad, so I'm gonna give him an F.
Yeah.
There's no reciprocity here in terms of a good or bad grade.
But you may have the student in another class, there might be fear of some sort of retaliation on the instructor's part, even after grades are submitted in some other way. I think it's, from a research standpoint, there's a guarantee of anonymity in questionnaires and surveys that you fill out, just to provide protection for the participants.
But I guess I don't understand what it is that they're being protected from. I mean, we've seen with all kinds of online comments that anonymity just begets nastiness. And if the student actually had to say these comments to the professor, I'm not suggesting that they should be more deferential, but that they should be willing to put their name on their opinion, because it forces them to really think through what they're going to say and what they might mean. If I give an eval, for example, right after a final exam, I'm going to get much worse scores than if I wait for a while, because they're just pissed off about the test. But it shouldn't matter, right? I mean, even if they're studying for a test, or if they just handed in a paper or whatever, if they know it's going to be anonymous, they can say anything they want to. And for new faculty, these student evals carry a lot of weight. They know who we are, and we should know who they are, but according to this system, we won't. I just don't understand what the added value for anonymity is that's got a proven benefit, where we know that there's a proven deficit or proven wrong.
I honestly don't think students would fill it out if they hadn't put their names on it.
Why not?
I just don't think you would get a response. For what I said before, I think fear of retaliation, I think students might be nervous that you would talk to a colleague, even if you don't have that student, you talk to a colleague and say, you better watch out for this student because they really nailed me on this evaluation, and you better, there's all kinds of things that they might think that may not be true, but might happen. I would say, if it's always okay to ask for your own feedback outside of this course evaluation, and invite students to mid-semester or whenever, invite students to give you feedback on a test or exam or something, and see.
That's what they won't do, actually. I can't get the students, most of the time, even if I build in class time, they still don't fill out the form unless I'm sitting there waiting, and then if they forget their smartphone or they forget their iPad or whatever, they'll say, I'll do it later, and they never do. So response rates are pretty low. I understand the point about trying to increase them, but I'm just thinking, when I was an undergrad, I never filled out the eval. It was a waste of time, because it didn't have any impact. So I'm just thinking about, if they're anonymous, then there's an additional disincentive to fill it out. They're anonymous already, but then if filling it out with their name on it is a disincentive, there's already so many disincentives to filling it out anyway, that it seems like you've got more on the negative side of the scale than the positive side of the scale with regards to anonymity, is all I'm saying. I don't mean to take up the whole time discussing it, I just wanted to raise this question because I've never heard a good answer to this.
Yeah, and we have nothing to do with whether those are done anonymously. We can take the feedback back, but Some of it is just longstanding tradition, and that's the expectation of students. And so I don't know if the changes in our technology are gonna change all that, and it might, but I do encourage you, just what you said, Brian, to ask for constructive feedback. I mean, I sometimes do it in my classes where I'll say, I'd appreciate for you to tell me one thing you really like about the class and one thing you wish were improved, so that, and sometimes I even do something cheesy and say, tell me 3 things you like and one thing you want to improve, just so that they have to think positively. Okay, it's a little manipulative, but you know, but it does get them thinking, and so those are ways that you can, I think, use a different system. So this isn't the only one where you could get feedback, but it's the standardized one across the university, but there are other ways you can get feedback too. And I appreciate your comments.
And I tell them, the class before I do the evaluations, I tell them next time we're doing the course evals, I would appreciate it if you give some thought to things that you like, things you didn't like. If you want more, tell me what I can take away, because I, need that feedback also. And then I just emphasize that I do use it, I read them, I use that for planning the next time I teach it, and so I just kind of appeal to their kindness and, please do it. And I haven't had a problem with response rates.
And maybe you're gonna discuss it more, but following up on what Ben said, are there analytic tools in our response data so we can see who's a major in this department versus non-majors, or freshmen versus, can we break down the data at all, or do we just get raw scores and percentages and that's it?
The only reports that I've seen are you get percentages by category, and then you get a mean score for each item, and then you get a mean for each dimension.
Okay, but there's no sorting.
Not the typical reporting. I'm guessing the testing center, whoever scans it, can probably do all sorts of things if you ask. I don't know for sure, but it's worth asking if there are specific questions that you have with the data. At the very least, they could probably send you the data set that you could export.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Something, but I don't know for sure. It's a good question. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna actually tell you a little bit about why TABS has been good for me first. And that is because I was a bit of a skeptic about course evaluations. Wasn't always excited about them, wasn't sure accuracy, and then this came about. When did this come? Do you remember, Holly? It's been several years that we've had this course evaluation, but
Not too many, though.
yeah, and so this one was new, and so I was just kind of learning it, getting the feedback, and then I was asked to be a TABS consultant, and that really helped me better understand the tool and better appreciate the tool, because I was not only able to see what the evaluation was doing for me, getting feedback, but I was also able to have some very cool conversations with colleagues and hopefully give them some help in how to use this tool. So it's been a nice process, I think. So what is, yes?
I have a question, just because of the change in this tool, so my mentors in the English department who have encouraged me to do TABS, I think did it themselves, I'm gonna say, under the prior tool, right?
Okay.
So if I didn't realize TABS was based on this, but if it is, then the evaluations that they got 10 years ago
Are gonna look different.
are gonna look different than what, so I should go back to them and, okay, all right, just have this light bulb moment.
Yeah,
Like, this
no,
is
that would
different
be
now,
excellent,
right?
and they, they can look online to see the system, to the TAB system, and yeah, and you can share the handout, and yeah, that is. So, and but I did TABS under the old model as a professor in my tenure track years, and then I've done it as a consultant with this one. This one's better, bottom line. This one's better.
It's definitely more.
Yes, you get so much more out of the information. And so that's really the purpose, is to identify teaching strengths and weaknesses. It's important to emphasize this is a confidential process. So if you and I met and talked about your test, I'm not even going to tell my colleague Brian that you and I met. That's just not a discussion. Nobody knows that we met. It's up to you to share that. So that's true of any TABS consultation. Totally confidential.
And even the forms that are kept at the Center for Faculty Excellence, it's not with names.
Yes.
It's
Thank
not
you.
with
Thank
names.
you
So,
for adding that.
so even institutionally,
Yes.
that's you own the data.
Right, and I don't save anything from a faculty member's consultation. I do not save your forms so that you know, there's no need for me. That's yours after the meeting, so. So again, it uses this form. When you do it, we've got a step-by-step here in a couple slides, but it's important to plan ahead, and so this is good timing for you. We're in week 3, because if you want to use it this semester, I highly encourage you to, you would want to give this course, this evaluation in either weeks 5, 6, or 7. So you can make contact this week, next week, and get that arranged. Simple process, and then your consultation would take place very soon after the actual evaluation day, the day that your students complete that. So, and this is free for faculty and grad students. So during that class that you choose, it's a class that you're choosing, that you would have, I'm sorry, I'm getting that, I've got that thing that all this, your students have out there, yeah, I'm blaming all the UNO students for that. So they will complete the questionnaire, and you will have class time to do that. Then you'll have a student send it back. There's a slide that tells you exactly how to have that done, where these go, and someone else does all the tabulation. And then a TABS consultant is chosen, and that there's several of us across campus that do this function, and our job then is to meet with an individual faculty member one-on-one. We do not meet with people within our department, and usually not within our college. So Brian and I don't meet with anybody in arts and sciences. Those are the consultants maybe from the other colleges. So that's important to keep, again, things confidential and appropriate that way. But during the consultation, and we usually schedule, I usually just say half hour to an hour, because it's all dependent upon how much conversation the dyad has. And usually there's more than you might anticipate. Because the job is to go through the averages. So Brian just mentioned you get an item average, you get a, like learning, you'll get an average for learning. Excuse me, you'll get an average for each of those items. And so we go through and we rank order and give you guys your strong areas, and have a way to report areas that you may have real strengths in and areas for possible improvement. And then taking both of those, strengths and possible improvement, you're brainstorming strategies, because you may think it's just a time to come in and talk about what do I need to improve, but I think it's just as much a conversation about what do I need to keep doing that I'm doing well? What is going well here? That's a very important conversation to have with your TABS consultant. So if you don't get that conversation, ask, but you will. So that then has led, in my personal experience, to some really interesting discussions. You know, Brian was talking about that one student who may have skewed results. I had a few years ago, a person, she had a student who she was describing who was kind of throwing off the class. And she hadn't seen her TABS ratings. Well, it was affected on, you know, some of that in the TABS, but so she was realizing that student was impacting other students. So she was able to, we were strategizing then, how do we work with that one student and that student's influence? And we really had a good outcome to that, and some great strategies. So you can do it numerous times. So you might say, I'm going to do it fall semester. I teach the same class in the spring. I'm going to do it then. We look for patterns. Are you seeing similar patterns across semesters? That. It's your choice if you want to put it in your RPT file. You don't have to. It is absolutely your choice. And I think that's really important. I also find, though, that most people like to put it in there, especially if there's some improvement trends, especially if there's improvement in the semester, or an explanation for a class that you might have had some strange little results for.
And what you get is we write a letter, a summary of your evaluation results and highlight strengths and then highlight areas that may be in need of improvement. And that's the document that you put in your file if you so choose.
It's rather official looking, but I want to say, so you get an official takeaway, but you also get a professional, kind of informal conversation, formal and informal. So this is the process. Gives you the phone numbers, emails to call to request tabs. You could even send the email now if you wanted. You will also send one of the course syllabus for, excuse me, whatever course you want.
Okay.
So some people do 2 courses. I've had some of my consultees come in and we're talking about 2 different courses or 2 sections of the same course. I talked about 3 different courses, which is really nice. You can look across and see the same or different across my different courses. That's really kind of an interesting conversation. You're going to get instructions, evaluations, a return envelope, and then you're going to have them complete it. We've talked about that. One of the students will return the evaluations to Kaiser 514. That'll be processed, and we've talked about the meeting that occurs from there. Anything you want to add?
Just that I forgot to change the number 1, the Center for Faculty Excellence. They're the same, one and the same, just renamed. I changed it on number 4.
Yeah, change that before.
It's-
We are no longer developing, we are
Yeah.
excellent. Darn it.
So does the email address change then?
No.
No,
I don't believe
not
it
yet.
does.
Not yet.
Still fact
It,
check.
it will after the regents finally sign off on all of it.
Nice. I like it.
So yes, questions, comments?
I'm curious how you present this to students. I mean, I know what I say to them when I give it to them at the end of the semester. Do you present it differently to them mid-semester?
What,
Or do you just, what do you do?
Yep, so I did this several times as a tenure track faculty, and I just said, you know that I've only been here for a few years, and I look for all kinds of opportunities that I can to improve what I do, and so one of those is to do a mid-semester course evaluation. So I'd appreciate your feedback at this point, and I'll review these results and look for changes that I can make now to make the rest of your semester even better. I've never had a person question that.
Lisa or Brian, can you tell, especially the new ones, how much time do they need to leave in their a class period to be able to do a TABS presentation or TABS, have them fill out the forms?
See if I have my.
If you do it at the beginning, right at the beginning of class, I would say 15, just because you'll have some stragglers in.
That's exactly what I can say.
Okay. Because it helps plan.
I tend to recommend to do it at the beginning of the class because they're more likely to fill it out more completely and reflectively rather than at the end when they just want to hand it in and get out the door.
Yeah.
Can you be present in the room? I mean, is there any evidence for you?
The end of semester course eval recommends that you not be present. We don't have that recommendation on the TABS directions as far as I know. When I've done it, I've just stood out in the hallway though, just to be consistent with the end of semester evaluation. Just in case they wanted to chat about something, which they don't usually, but just, I guess it kind of goes back to that anonymity piece where I feel like it was important for me to have my students feel free to complete the evaluation without me around. But I don't think there's any rule, it's just personal choice.
Is there anything that you can do with this that accommodates non-native English speakers who may not understand the language used in this sort of evaluation and therefore have a hard time accurately expressing their opinions or understanding what you're asking?
Boy, that's a
What
big
a
question.
good.
That was exactly.
Actually, that leads into some other things that we've been working with international studies on, and that's kind of in the works. It's not in place yet, but it would require that student actually to take it someplace else.
Because you couldn't give them a different text, or why would they need to take it somewhere else?
If you want, you mean something translated into Chinese
No,
or Spanish
not at
or, no, okay.
Not translated, but just using more accessible language in English. Because, for example, students who come to UNO for an undergraduate degree have to have a TOEFL score of 500 or 61.
Yeah,
And so they've already demonstrated an ability to communicate at an English proficiency level that the university deems accessible or acceptable. So they don't need the translation, but they can, at the same time, some of the terminology in here might be a little bit abstract for them to grasp. So is there any way that you could or would or have modified the language in a way that might be more accessible to those students?
that is something that will, I think it's a great question too. I think we have to work with the people that adapted the SEEK, because it would be, you need it at the end of the semester too, right?
Yeah, it'd be the transfer, the change of.
The altered form would be needed both times. I thought you taught an ESL class and you really wanted the whole thing
Well-
translated, that's why.
They are, 100% of my evaluations are by students whose first language is not English. Because I have 2 sections of ESL. And it takes them a half hour to do it. And I'm not confident they know what they're doing. And fortunately, the English department isn't running so heavy on my numbers. I mean, they'd like me to have all 5s, but they don't seem to be concerned when they're not. But I think mine are consistently lower than other people in my department. So it'll be very interesting for me to do tabs.
Yeah,
And see
I'm
what they
almost
say.
tempted, it would be really interesting to have like a little focus group of some of your students to see what is their understanding of English. You know, what we're doing beyond it. That's a relevant question and need.
It's going to be a fabulous community of practice to set up to have an end product of that new document by spring.
Well, and does
Yeah,
it,
that's right.
does it go beyond the Center for Faculty Excellence though, if we start to change the tool?
Oh, yeah, it would have to be, because the other reason we wanted to use the same tool, because the students saw it once, and then it would repeat it, just like Brian had said, again at the end of the semester. So it would need to be worked with the folks that are,
But somebody else on another campus has had to have addressed this issue
Mhm.
too, that we could, well, I assume. See what others use.
It's a great question though, and could, that brings up to me, could an instructor or maybe not the class instructor, but a colleague go in and read the questions aloud and check for understanding or ask if there are questions about the questions when they complete it?
I think it's something that you're gonna have to address eventually,
Yeah.
especially with the global initiative on campus to increase the international learning.
Yeah,
that's a good, I'm so glad you brought that up.
thank you.
So in scheduling the mid-semester, there's often midterms, and those can change perceptions about the course depending on, especially with the first test. And so I could see that also being useful information to, if there are mismatched levels, or I would recommend putting it 4 so that it's not quite as biased by that exam, one way or the other, I guess. I mean, I guess the grades give feedback on their level of understanding, but
It might factor into one of the dimensions, and that would be a way just to consider the interpretation of those results. But I would think that even if it was just after a midterm, that's not gonna change their perception of your enthusiasm or your perception of how well you're organized. So I think it would probably just be more of a when does it fit?
okay.
Versus purposely scheduling it before or after an exam.
I'm just gonna say, I've not had that discussion. I mean, it's not been something that's come up with my consultees.
Okay.
Maybe, maybe not right before or right after, and maybe that's how they're strategizing, so they're not seeing that it's an impact. But
Right.
they will talk about exams and talk about assignments and
Yeah.
and how the students are perceiving them, but I have not had that conversation, so it may
Okay,
not
so it may
impact.
Yeah.
Can't say that for sure, I haven't seen research behind it, but
Yeah,
just
I
that's
just-
my
It
experience.
seems like there's anxiety build up, you know, before the first test when it,
Yeah, for
after
all
the
of
first
us.
one, then it's okay,
Yeah.
the level.
And maybe it would be something, think somewhat experimentally about it, so one semester do it before and another semester do it right after and see if there's a difference, and then you have data to suggest, look at, right after this exam, they're just really mad at me. And then how does it go
I
up?
love me.
Yeah, well, and then compare to the end of the semester, because you'll have the same exact questions, is there a difference there?
What are the considerations with class size? If I've got a mix of, I've got a really large intro class, or I've got a seminar class that's got, fewer than 10 people, what kind of things would I need to be thinking about if I were doing tabs for both of those groups?
There used to be, with the old tabs, a recommendation that it was a class of like 15 or more. It used to be, but my understanding is it doesn't matter. So class size doesn't necessarily matter if you should do this or not. I think for me what happens with small classes is that the data gets skewed a little bit more if there's an outlier, so your mean scores can be drastically affected if someone really loves you or really doesn't love you. And that's just something to consider in your interpretation, but I don't think it should change whether or not you do it. It's just how you look at the results.
I think smaller classes, you tend to get a higher percentage of them back. Which actually, I think that's data too. I've had some where there's someone's teaching 2 sections of the same class. There's 50 in each class. They get 45 back in one and 25 in another, and and there's information. There's information about engagement, so they realize, okay, I'm not sampling the whole group, so you may be more confident feedback you get in the smaller classes. But again, that's where doing a little pep talk about filling it out and how helpful it is. I think that, and I said that earlier, that's going to be a critical factor.
And so I guess if I'm understanding this correctly, the tabs this is what we're going to get in 2 or 3 weeks to give out to the students, and then the students will fill this exact thing out again at the end of the semester.
Right.
Okay, and so with that, I guess these question was brought up, but for the supplemental instruction, supplemental questions, we can make our own questions and then have them fill it out, and then we can put out the questions, I guess, to the tabs evaluators, and it'll help with that, or?
We haven't.
I don't think anyone do that, but I don't see why you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see why you can't for tabs, because as far as I know, there's no conversation to put this online, and so you could, 41 through 52, you could just tell them what your question is and then tell us and look at your data. Yeah.
So for tabs, is it the old system then, insofar as we get these actually back physically? So we could just tell them if, it's all anonymous, but then we can use that to get everyone.
Actually, with tabs, you don't get these
Oh, okay.
originals back. Somebody for tabs does type all the responses up.
Oh, okay, cool.
And you get the typed responses in a document.
So they'll do those supplemental questions. So, but then again, it's unlinked, so it's of no use for analysis. Because we can't tell if everybody who was a certain major gave us 5s and everyone who was a different major gave us 1s. So, yeah, I guess that's right.
But that you're saying they would type the handwritten, if you ask, what can we do, or what would you like to see?
Yeah,
more
I
of,
would,
what would you like to
when
see
you're
more of?
doing tabs, I would highly encourage you to encourage them to respond to the open-ended questions. There's a lot of variability in terms of feedback on those open-ended, and I have to wonder if some of it is dependent on how much the instructor says. I could really use your information, what you think about number 1. That would be very helpful to me. Would you please spend some time on that? You see what you would get. Those make for very good discussions in a consultation meeting, those comments. There's usually some insight into, if they think, if you're getting some really high ratings in one, and there's often some supplementary statements that will benefit. I think that's very helpful for you to know that. You know, what is it? You know, there's some specifics about the rating, but when they're adding comments, I think that's very helpful in our teaching. But also if there's some area that's not as strong, and then they provide some insight. You know, maybe they like group work, but they don't like how you're doing the group work. It's, you know, they're finding that some of the students aren't pulling their weight. You know, that's gonna come out on those. Pick up on some of those problems that are actually fixable before the end. Because when you get those at the end of the semester, you think, I wish I would have known that in week 7. Now you get to know it in week 7. So it's really, you know, we talk about it a lot as helpful for your RPT, but, you know, it's helpful anywhere along the line, just to get that feedback on your teaching.
I like the idea too of giving them some ownership of fixing the class, you know, taking it, what, it's not just out of their hands.
Other questions? Thank you.
We'll thank our presenters. Thank you very much. We have